very much, Nat. Minister, last October, Holy Spirit Junior School in Greenhills was told that they were losing a teaching post and would have to go from 4 junior infants classes to 3. This was because a number of parents who had planned to start their children in junior infants in September decided to keep them back a year, given the scale of the COVID pandemic at the time and the negative impact it had already had on their children's preschool education. For the last 5 months, the school has managed to shuffle around teaching hours, use the COVID learning and support scheme to keep the 4th junior infants class open and keep the teacher at the school. However, they've now reached the end of the line, and unless that scheme or some other support is extended, this teacher will be out of a job, the classroom closed, and the kids scattered across the remaining 3 classes. It will have a massively disruptive impact on those children, and it will push their class sizes above the pupil-teacher ratio for the DEIS Band 1, which the school is in. The school and the parents and the children are pleading for supports now to keep the class open and to keep the teacher at their post for the remaining weeks of the school year. They're also pleading for the 4th junior infants class to be supported come September this year. As it stands, the 3 junior infants classes for starting September 2022 are fully subscribed, and the school has a waiting list of 24 other children looking for a place. On top of this, they've already proactively been welcoming in Ukrainian children, refugees from war, and are expecting more. It makes no sense whatsoever to have a classroom empty and 24 children unable to get a school place simply because the school numbers dipped during a particular period in the pandemic. The assurances that they are seeking is that come September they will have 4 junior infants classes again. If the Minister can give that assurance, well then surely you would also agree that it would be folly to lay off a teacher now and close a class, put 4 classes into 3 and all the disruption that would cause just to go back and try to get the teacher back come September. I've been contacted by many parents whose children either go to the school or are looking to go to the school, outlining the impact that it has on them. One, I just quote from Jessica, who says, "I was one of the parents who made the extremely difficult decision to delay school entry for my child due to serious concerns about the impact of COVID and restrictions on my child and education." And it goes on to explain that very difficult decision. "I was not the only parent to take this difficult decision, and as a result of reduced enrolments, the school lost a teaching post. At the time, I was unaware of the impact my decision would have, but to penalise the school by reducing teacher numbers is short-sighted on the part of the decision makers." Goes on to say, "Failure to address this will cause lasting damage to the education of this cohort of children." I wrote to Minister Foley about this last October, and the Minister replied, "The school's enrolment did not reach enrolment required to maintain the post for the remainder of the year. They submitted an appeal and published appeal criteria, operates independently, and its decision is final, i.e. no." But the issue is that the grounds for appeal at that time were outdated. It didn't take into account the fact that we were in a pandemic. The dip in numbers starting junior infants last September was much higher than normal as a result of this pandemic. It was a once-off. It should be treated as such, and neither the school, the parents, the students, the teacher, none of them should be punished as a consequence of that, and they need a commitment that they retain the teacher now and retain the class in September.
And thank you, Deputy, for giving me the opportunity to outline to the House the position in relation to staffing in primary schools. I'm happy to take this question for Minister Foley. The key factor for determining the level of staffing resources provided at individual school level is the staffing schedule for the relevant school year and pupil enrolments on the previous 30th of September. And the staffing schedule is an allocation mechanism that uses enrolment bands to determine the number of classroom teaching posts allocated to a school. This is a long-standing arrangement for allocating teaching posts to our primary schools in a fair and equitable way based on their respective enrolment. Previous budgets of 2016, 2018 and 2021 improved the staffing schedule by 1 point on each occasion to its historical lowest level ever of one classroom teacher on average to 25 pupils, with lower thresholds applying to DESH urban band 1 schools. In addition, there has been a 3-point reduction in the retention schedule, which has helped schools that would otherwise be at risk of losing teaching posts. The staffing arrangements include a provision whereby schools experiencing rapid increases in enrolment can apply for additional permanent mainstream posts on developing grounds using projected enrolment. And I understand that this, Deputy, as you outlined, is what occurred here. Holy Spirit Junior National School was allocated a temporary teaching post on this basis, as the school had indicated that it was expecting an enrolment of 263 pupils in September 2021, which was a projected increase of 25 pupils. And I think you have conceded that there were some children that were going to enrol, then they didn't. The department received an enrolment return of 246 pupils from the school as at 30th September 2021, which is an increase of 8 in the pupil enrolment of the previous year. So the enrolment required, Deputy, to retain the post for the remainder of the year was 263 pupils. So therefore, the school was informed, as you said correctly, that the post was to be suppressed at the end of October last. So therefore, with an enrolment of 246 pupils, which is what it has at present, and 13 mainstream teachers, the school is operating on a mainstream pupil-teacher ratio of 18.9, which compares to 1, which compares favourably with the general allocation ratio of 20:1 for junior DESH schools. So it's important to point that out. The staffing process does include, as you say, an appeals mechanism for schools to submit a staffing appeal under certain published criteria. And the school appealed the suppression of the post to the Primary Staffing Appeals Board, which did refuse the appeal on the basis that the grounds of the appeal did not warrant the allocation of an additional post under the published staffing arrangements. And the Primary Staffing Appeals Board operates independently of the department, and its decision is final. And I know you're aware of all of that, Deputy. And I think it's important to say that there has to be, fairness and an equitable, transparent, clear type of staffing schedule when we're talking about schools, and we can't have one rule for one school and another for another, and that's the issue that's happened here. The school staffing for the current school year was finalised in October following the completion of the staffing appeals process, and the school is not, as you know, due to lose a teaching post next week. I have taken into account what you've said, however, about using up the class scheme, etc. All types of schools have to be treated equally, irrespective of location. And my understanding in relation to this school is that because there had been a projected amount of children that were due to attend the school and then they didn't attend the school, we have at the moment sufficient teachers, which is 13 mainstream teachers, for a pupil-teacher ratio of 18:9, when the normal junior DESH school will be 20:1, and the department is therefore satisfied that it has sufficient staffing under the circumstances.
I wonder if there a copy of your response. There usually is, but no.
I can get one to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Deputy Murphy.
Thanks. I appreciate that the Minister has the response from the department and is reading it out, but it's just, that's the same response that we got, in October 2021, basically, which is just a sticking to the rigid bureaucratic rules. These are the numbers, etc., and not taking into account the reason that they fell short was because of the pandemic. The school then took the decision to try and use some resources available to them to try and maintain the 4 junior infant classes that they started off with. I think that was an honourable thing that they did. And now, what the department continues, it seems, to say to them is we're going to force at this stage in the school year, we're going to force 4 classes into 3, and we're not going to allow you to have 4 classes next year. Even though, from September 2022, the numbers are clearly there in terms of the waiting list of 24 for junior infants. I have email after email from parents who are heartbroken because they're unable to get into the school for starting in September because precisely the 4th teacher is not being provided. The principal wrote wrote to Minister Foley and the Taoiseach, I think, to say in relation to the rules that you've just cited, while it's understood the rules must be fair and transparent, we were going through a very unpredictable and extraordinary time, and so fairness needed to be reinterpreted. I think that's an absolutely reasonable position. They went on to explain that the school needed 254 pupils to retain the 14th teacher at the end of last September 2021. We did not reach that number in September, but due in some part to the crisis in Ukraine, we now have 252 pupils. We appeal now for the extension of the schemes so we can keep the substitute teacher until the end of June. I mean, this is very simple. We've lived through extraordinary times. All sorts of rules that have been in place have been bent and broken and so on. And there's simple asks that are being appealed for here, that the teacher is retained for the rest of this year, that's there for the 4th class, and that the resources are put in place so that the 4th class can be in place in September.
First of all, Deputy, I think the key word in relation to this particular school is the word temporary. The extra staff member that was given was only ever on the basis that it was a temporary measure. It was never meant to be permanent, and it was very strictly told and categorically told to the school that they wouldn't be in a position to retain this staff member only if they actually had the projected amount of children, which it then transpired that they didn't. The difficulty is, and you make some points, not without merit with some of them that you're mentioning, particularly around the pandemic and around taking in Ukrainian children. The difficulty is that there are 4,000 schools also looking for teaching staff at various different particular times during the year, and there has to be some sort of system that is fair and that is equitable for all of these schools. And the department is satisfied that the fact that you have 246 pupils and 18 mainstream teachers at a pupil-teacher ratio of 18:1 is satisfactory at present. That doesn't mean to say, and I know that you mentioned this earlier on yourself, that in September, should there be a change in circumstances and should there be an increase in enrolment, then the situation can be reviewed again, and that applies across the board for all teachers and indeed for SNAs under my particular remit, who can apply for exception reviews, and schools can apply for exception reviews. We are at present in a very unpredictable situation vis-a-vis the education sector in its entirety, when we're talking about the influx of Ukrainian children coming into the education sector, and the schools and the staff have already been under significant stress in relation to COVID, and now, and I want to thank those schools that have come forward to help with Ukrainians. But this is something that can be reviewed at a later stage. But it's important to stress that at the moment it has a current staffing allocation that is satisfactory to the department.